My husband stood beneath the crystal chandeliers of a downtown Chicago ballroom, smiling as hundreds of people applauded him for his honesty and devotion to family. Right beside him stood my best friend Vanessa, wearing the diamond necklace I had given her for her 50th birthday. Neither of them noticed my hands trembling around the black leather purse resting on my lap, because inside that purse were copies of hotel receipts, fake charity transfers, private emails, and enough proof to destroy both of their careers before the night was over. And the worst part, I still remembered the day I called Vanessa my sister. Before I tell you how I uncovered everything, I want to ask you something, honestly. If someone betrayed you after decades of love and friendship, would you expose them publicly or walk away quietly? Please like and subscribe if stories like this speak to you. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always read your messages late at night when the house gets quiet. People used to look at Daniel and me like we were the kind of couple that survived everything. 35 years of marriage, 1 daughter, a beautiful brick house on the north side of Chicago with white shutters. Daniel painted himself one summer when we were still young enough to believe hard work solved every problem. At charity events, women used to squeeze my hand and whisper, "You're lucky, Lauren. Good men don't exist anymore." And every single time I smiled and agreed, because I believed it too. I met Daniel Gibson when I was 22 years old and working my first real accounting job for a healthcare consulting firm downtown. He was charming in a quiet way back then, not flashy, not arrogant. He wore cheap ties and drove an old Honda with rust near the tires, but he had ambition burning inside him like a furnace. Back then, ambition looked attractive to me. I grew up in a small Indiana town where women were taught to admire stable men, responsible men with goals. Daniel had goals. He talked about changing hospital systems, improving patient care, modernizing administration. He could sit at a dinner table and make spreadsheets sound romantic. And somehow, I fell in love with him for it. We struggled during the early years. There were nights we split one takeout dinner because money was tight. I worked long hours while Daniel climbed the ladder inside St. Catherine's Medical Network. I balanced budgets during the day and studied financial compliance manuals late into the night while he prepared executive presentations beside me at the kitchen table. We built everything together. At least that's what I thought. When Olivia was born, I stepped back from my career to raise her. Daniel insisted it was temporary. "You're better with numbers than anyone I know," he used to tell me. "One day, when things calm down, you'll go back." But things never calmed down. Daniel's promotions came faster. Bigger responsibilities. More dinners. More networking events. More weekends sacrificed for important meetings. And slowly, without either of us saying it aloud, my life became centered around supporting his. I organized fundraisers, hosted dinner parties, reviewed his speeches, managed household finances, remembered birthdays for people Daniel wanted to impress. I became invisible in the way many wives do after enough years pass. Not unloved, just absorbed into someone else's identity. But I didn't resent it then, because Daniel always made me feel included in his success. When he became Chief Executive Officer of Lakeshore Medical Center at 52, he cried in our kitchen while holding the official offer letter. I remember standing barefoot beside him in my pajamas while snow fell outside our windows. "We did it," he whispered. "We." That word meant everything to me back then. And Vanessa Carter had been beside us almost the entire journey. I met Vanessa through a hospital fundraiser nearly 27 years earlier. She was magnetic in the way certain women are. Warm smile, perfect posture. The kind of woman who remembered everyone's children's birthdays, allergies, favorite wine. People trusted her instantly, including me. Especially me. Vanessa had gone through a brutal divorce in her 40s, and I stood beside her through all of it. I helped her move apartments. I slept on her couch after she had panic attacks. I held her while she cried over betrayal and loneliness. At one point, she told me, "Lauren, you're more family to me than my own sister." And I believed that too. Over the years, Vanessa became part of everything. Christmas dinners, Lake Michigan vacations, Olivia's graduation party, Sunday brunches. She even had her own coffee mug in my kitchen cabinet. Eventually, when Daniel helped establish a major charitable foundation connected to Lakeshore Medical Center, Vanessa became executive director of the organization. She was perfect for it, elegant, persuasive, beloved by wealthy donors. And because of my background in auditing and compliance, I helped them structure the financial oversight during the early years. That part mattered later. At the time, it simply felt like helping family. By 58, I thought I understood my life completely. I thought I knew the man sleeping beside me. I thought I knew the woman who hugged me every week. I thought loyalty worked like a bank account, years of love deposited safely against future pain. I was wrong. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact season things started changing. It began quietly. Daniel became protective of his phone. Not dramatically at first, just subtle little things, turning the screen downward during dinner, taking calls in the hallway, smiling at messages late at night. And every time I asked what was funny, he answered too quickly. Work stuff. Work. That magical word powerful men use when they stop wanting explanations questioned. Vanessa changed too. She started canceling plans unexpectedly. She stopped lingering after dinners. Sometimes I'd catch her watching Daniel when she thought nobody noticed. And once, only once, I saw Daniel touch the small of her back while she walked into our dining room. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. Such a tiny thing. But something cold moved through my stomach anyway. I remember standing at the sink rinsing wine glasses while laughter floated behind me from the dining room. Daniel was telling some story about hospital politics, and Vanessa laughed harder than necessary. When I turned around, both of them looked away too fast. That was the first moment, the very first crack in the life I thought was unbreakable. But after 35 years of marriage, your mind does strange things to protect you. I told myself I was imagining it. Men and women can be friends. Best friends become family. Family doesn't betray you. Right. A few weeks later, Daniel forgot his phone on the kitchen counter while showering upstairs. The screen lit up beside me while I drank coffee. I wasn't trying to snoop. God help me, I truly wasn't. But I saw Vanessa's name appear across the screen. And underneath it were 6 words that changed my entire life. I missed last night already. I stared at the message so long my coffee went cold in my hands. Then the screen went black. And upstairs, I could still hear my husband humming in the shower, like nothing in the world had changed. I must have read Vanessa's message 20 times before Daniel came downstairs. I missed last night already. 6 simple words. Not dramatic, not explicit. But when you've been married to someone for 35 years, you learn how to hear the meaning hiding underneath ordinary sentences. I remember sitting perfectly still at the kitchen island while Daniel walked in, wearing his navy robe, drying his hair with a towel. For one terrifying second, I wondered if he could hear my heartbeat. He smiled at me casually. "Morning, sweetheart." Sweetheart. The audacity of that word nearly made me nauseous. I watched him pick up his phone from the counter. His expression changed so slightly most people would never notice it. But I noticed. A tiny flicker in his eyes. Fear. Then it disappeared. He slid the phone into his pocket and kissed the top of my head like nothing had happened. "I'll be late tonight," he said. "Board meeting ran over yesterday, so we're regrouping after dinner." I nodded. That was all. just one nod. Because if I opened my mouth, I was afraid something ugly would crawl out of me. The strange thing about betrayal is that your body recognizes it before your mind fully accepts it. For days afterward, I couldn't eat properly. I couldn't sleep more than an hour or two. I kept replaying tiny memories in my head, like scenes from a movie I suddenly realized had a completely different ending. Vanessa touching Daniel's arm too long. Daniel volunteering to drive her home after fundraisers. Private jokes I didn't understand. The time Olivia jokingly called them the hospital power couple, and they both laughed too hard. God, how long had I been the only fool in the room? Still, part of me desperately wanted an innocent explanation. Maybe last night referred to a meeting. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe menopause and anxiety and aging were turning me paranoid. Women my age are taught to distrust our instincts. We're taught we're emotional, sensitive, irrational. So I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Until 3 nights later, Daniel claimed he had another executive dinner downtown. Around 9 o'clock, Vanessa texted me asking if I wanted to meet for coffee sometime that weekend. That alone made my stomach twist. Because if she was with Daniel, why was she texting me? I replied normally anyway. Would love that. Then I stared at her message for almost 10 minutes before doing something I had never done in 35 years of marriage. I tracked my husband's location. Years earlier, Olivia had helped us set up family location sharing for safety reasons. We barely used it anymore, but it still existed. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped my phone. Daniel wasn't downtown at the hospital restaurant he mentioned. He was at the Palmer House Hotel, and according to the map, he'd been there for over 2 hours. I still remember the feeling that rushed through me in that moment. Not sadness, not even anger. Humiliation. Pure humiliation. Because suddenly, every memory felt contaminated. I sat alone in my dark living room, staring at the tiny glowing dot on my phone screen, while rain tapped against the windows. My husband was in a hotel, and deep down, I already knew who he was probably with, but I still couldn't make myself believe it completely, so I drove there. Even now, I'm ashamed of how desperate I looked. A 58-year-old woman in sweatpants gripping a steering wheel with white knuckles, while Chicago rain blurred the windshield. I parked across the street from the hotel entrance just after 10. And I waited. Part of me prayed I'd see Daniel walk out alone. Part of me prayed I'd laugh at myself later for being dramatic. Instead, at 10:43 p.m., Vanessa walked out through the revolving doors, wearing the same cream-colored coat she'd worn to lunch with me 2 days earlier. Daniel came out seconds behind her, laughing, relaxed, comfortable, like this wasn't new, like this had already become routine. I don't remember breathing. Vanessa touched his chest while she said something. Then Daniel leaned down and kissed her. Not a guilty kiss. Not hesitant. A familiar one. That was the moment my marriage ended. Not later in court papers. Not during arguments. Not at the gala. Right there inside my car, while rain streaked down the windshield and my husband kissed my best friend under the lights of a luxury hotel. I thought I would scream. I thought I would storm across the street and slap both of them. Instead, I sat frozen, because something inside me had gone frighteningly cold. I followed them afterward, not closely, just enough. Daniel drove Vanessa to her condo near Lakeshore Drive. He stayed there almost an hour before finally heading home. When he walked through our front door shortly after midnight, I was sitting in bed pretending to read. He smiled at me tiredly. Long night. I looked directly into the eyes of the man who had betrayed me, and I said, I'm sure it was. For a second, just 1 second, I thought he knew. But then he relaxed. That was when I realized something horrifying. Daniel believed I would never suspect him, never challenge him, never leave him. Men like Daniel build entire lives around the belief that loyal women will absorb pain quietly forever. The next morning, I called Vanessa. I wanted to hear her voice. I wanted to know if guilt sounded different over the phone. "Lauren," she answered warmly. "I was just thinking about you." Liar. "We should do lunch soon," I said carefully. "I'd love that." She sounded completely normal, completely comfortable. I hung up feeling physically ill. But the worst part came later that afternoon. I was doing laundry when I found a folded receipt inside Daniel's suit jacket pocket. Palmer House Hotel. 2 guests, wine service, presidential suite, but one detail made my stomach drop even harder. The payment method. Lakeshore Foundation corporate account. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't mistaken. The charitable foundation. Vanessa's foundation. The same foundation connected to Daniel's hospital. The same organization I had helped structure financially years ago. At first, I thought maybe Daniel used the wrong card accidentally. Then, I noticed the total. Over $3,800. For one evening. And suddenly, my auditing instincts, the instincts I hadn't used in years, came roaring back to life. Because people having affairs lie emotionally. But people stealing money leave patterns. I sat at the kitchen table staring at that receipt while memories surfaced one by one. Missing financial summaries Vanessa once brushed off. Delayed donor reports. Daniel insisting external audits be postponed because the hospital was too busy. Tiny details I ignored because I trusted them. Because I loved them. A cold wave crawled up my spine. What if the affair wasn't the only secret? What if I had been blind to something much bigger? Upstairs, I heard Daniel moving around in his office. And for the first time in 35 years, I realized I was no longer afraid of losing my marriage. I was afraid of discovering who my husband really was. For the next 2 days, I pretended nothing had changed. I made coffee every morning, folded laundry, asked Daniel whether he wanted salmon or chicken for dinner, and every second of it felt like performing inside a nightmare. The strange thing about discovering betrayal at my age is that your grief becomes quieter. Younger women throw plates, they scream, they pack bags dramatically. But when you're 58, devastation settles differently. It moves into your bones. It sits across from you at the breakfast table while your husband reads the newspaper. It follows you into grocery stores and pharmacies and church parking lots. And underneath all of it, one terrifying question keeps whispering in your ear. How long has everyone been lying to me? Daniel acted perfectly normal. That part still chills me. He kissed my cheek before work. Asked if I wanted anything from Whole Foods on his way home. Complained about board politics over dinner. Meanwhile, I knew he was sleeping with Vanessa. And somehow, he could still look me directly in the eye. I started noticing things I'd ignored for months, maybe years. Daniel guarded his laptop now. Not aggressively, just carefully. If he stepped away from his office, he closed it. If emails appeared while we watched television, he angled the screen slightly away. Once I walked into the study unexpectedly and saw him minimize something so quickly, he nearly dropped the mouse. He smiled too fast afterward. Just financial projections, he said. I smiled back. I'm sure they're thrilling. For the first time in our marriage, we were both lying at the same table. 3 nights later, Daniel came home late after another fundraiser planning meeting. He'd been drinking. Not heavily, but enough that his shoulders loosened and his words blurred slightly together. I'm exhausted, he muttered while loosening his tie. Long week. I stood in the kitchen watching him. This man had slept beside me for over 3 decades. I knew every expression on his face. And suddenly, I realized something horrifying. He didn't feel guilty. He felt inconvenienced, like hiding the affair was becoming tiring. That realization hurt more than the cheating itself, because guilt would have meant he still understood love. Instead, Daniel behaved like a man balancing logistics. He fell asleep quickly that night. Around midnight, I got out of bed for water and saw a faint glow beneath the crack of his office door. The laptop. He'd left it open. For almost 10 minutes, I stood in the hallway staring at that light. Every decent part of me whispered to walk away. Good wives don't invade privacy. Good people don't snoop. But then another voice inside me answered back. Good husbands don't sleep with your best friend. I opened the office door slowly. Daniel's laptop sat on the desk screen awake, unlocked, waiting. Even now, I can still remember the sound of the clock ticking in the hallway while I sat down in his chair. My hands were ice cold. At first, I almost closed it again. Then an email notification appeared in the corner of the screen. From Vanessa, and my entire life shattered open. The subject line read, "Tomorrow night." I clicked it before I could stop myself. Lauren, I swear sometimes I think she notices the way you look at me. Be careful at the gala next week. And stop texting me after midnight unless you want your wife getting suspicious. Miss you already. V. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might faint. But that wasn't even the worst part. Because below it stretched dozens of emails, months of them. Hotel reservations, private jokes, sexual messages, complaints about me. That part nearly killed me. I could survive knowing my husband slept with another woman. But reading the way they spoke about me behind my back, that pain was different. Crueler. She still thinks we're happy. Lauren notices everything except what's right in front of her. She's too loyal to ever leave. Too loyal. I sat there staring at those words while tears slid silently down my face. Vanessa knew my deepest insecurities. She knew I feared becoming invisible with age, and somehow she weaponized that trust against me. I kept scrolling. Then something changed. The tone of the emails shifted from romantic to nervous. Discussion of transfers, reports, missing documents. I frowned. One message from Daniel read, "Move the donor allocation before quarterly review." Another from Vanessa. "What about Lauren's old authorization access?" Then Daniel replied, "She hasn't checked those systems in years." A cold sensation crawled through me. Suddenly I wasn't reading affair messages anymore. I was reading operational conversations. Financial conversations. I opened the attached files. Spreadsheets, transfer summaries, expense reimbursements. At first glance, they looked ordinary. But years of auditing had trained my brain differently. Tiny inconsistencies jumped out immediately. Rounded numbers where exact totals should exist. Repeated vendor IDs, duplicate processing codes, and then I saw it. Electronic approval signatures. Mine. My blood turned to ice. Lauren Gibson. Authorization approved. Again, and again, and again. Except I had never approved any of it. I opened another file. Same thing. Then another. Thousands of dollars. Luxury travel. Private entertainment expenses. Consulting payouts. Hidden beneath charitable disbursements connected to the hospital foundation. I stopped breathing for a second. This wasn't sloppy embezzlement. It was organized, careful, layered, and my name was attached to it. I quickly checked timestamps. Some approvals were created while I was literally out of state visiting Olivia. One was signed electronically at 2:14 a.m. I almost laughed out loud at the stupidity of that mistake. They'd grown careless. Arrogant people always do eventually. My eyes drifted to a folder titled Archive. Inside were scanned hotel receipts, expense reports, private travel itineraries, and then one file made my stomach drop. LG_backup_authorization. LG, Lauren Gibson. I opened it slowly. Inside were copies of my old authorization credentials from years earlier when I briefly helped establish oversight systems for the foundation. Daniel had kept them. All these years. Not for memories, for access. I leaned back in the chair, shaking. The affair suddenly became something even uglier. They hadn't only betrayed me emotionally, they had used me, used my reputation, used my professional history, used my trust as cover. And if this scandal exploded publicly, my name would be attached to it first. I looked toward the dark hallway outside the office. Daniel was upstairs sleeping peacefully while evidence of fraud sat glowing on his computer screen. For the first time since discovering the affair, my sadness began transforming into something else. Something colder, more focused. I pulled my phone from my pocket and started taking pictures of everything. Emails, transfers, signatures, dates. I worked methodically the same way I used to during investigations years ago. No panic, no wasted motion, just evidence. Because suddenly, I understood something clearly. If Daniel and Vanessa realized I knew the truth, they would protect themselves first. And powerful people protect themselves by destroying whoever stands closest to the fire. Including me. Especially me. By the time I finished, it was almost 3 a.m. I carefully closed the laptop exactly as I found it. Then I stood alone in Daniel's office, staring at family photos lining the shelves. Christmas mornings, beach vacations, Olivia as a little girl sitting on Daniel's shoulders. An entire life built on trust. Or maybe built on my willingness to believe lies. Upstairs, my husband slept peacefully in our bed, while I stood in the dark, realizing something irreversible. I was no longer just a betrayed wife. I was a witness. The next morning, I made pancakes. I know that sounds insane. After discovering my husband's affair, uncovering financial fraud, and realizing my own name had been attached to forged approvals, I stood in my kitchen at 7 a.m, flipping pancakes, while Daniel drank coffee across from me. But trauma does strange things to people. Part of me needed normalcy to survive the shock. And another part of me needed Daniel to believe I still trusted him. He sat at the kitchen island reading emails on his phone while sunlight spilled through the windows. "Big gala next Saturday," he said casually. "Vanessa thinks we might break fundraising records this year." Vanessa. He said her name so comfortably. I smiled tightly while placing a plate in front of him. "That's wonderful." Daniel looked up at me briefly. "You okay? You seem tired lately." The irony almost made me laugh. Instead, I said, "Just haven't been sleeping well." He nodded sympathetically. Stress catches up with us at this age. At this age. As if aging itself explained the exhaustion hollowing out my body, instead of the fact that my husband was betraying me with my best friend while stealing charitable funds under my name. I watched him cut into pancakes with the same hands that touched Vanessa. The same hands that forged my authorization credentials. And suddenly, something became crystal clear to me. Daniel didn't think I was dangerous. That was his first mistake. The second mistake was forgetting who I used to be. Long before I became Daniel Gibson's wife, I was Lauren Mitchell's senior internal auditor for Midwestern Healthcare Compliance Group. I investigated fraud for a living. I understood patterns. Risk exposure, digital trails, human behavior under pressure. Back then, executives hated seeing me walk into conference rooms because they knew I noticed details other people ignored. Expense inconsistencies, timestamp irregularities, duplicated approvals. People always think financial crimes are about money. They're not. They're about ego. Greed makes people sloppy eventually, and Daniel had clearly grown sloppy. The moment he left for work that morning, I went upstairs and locked myself inside my old home office. The room still smelled faintly like paper and printer ink from years ago. I hadn't used it seriously since retirement. Family photo albums now occupied shelves that once held audit binders, but sitting there again awakened something inside me I thought I'd lost. Focus. I pulled an old external hard drive from my desk drawer. Then I started working. First, I created a new encrypted email account Daniel couldn't trace. Next, I began documenting everything systematically. Dates, transfers, email screenshots, hotel receipts, electronic signatures. I built folders the same way I used to during investigations. Clean, organized, chronological, emotionally detached, at least on the surface. But every few minutes, grief punched through my concentration unexpectedly. A photo of Daniel smiling at a charity event. An email from Vanessa ending with "Love you." A reimbursement request for a luxury suite they probably used together. Every piece of evidence felt personal. Around noon, I found myself staring at our wedding photo sitting on the bookshelf. I looked so young, so certain. Daniel's arm wrapped around my waist like I was the most precious thing in the world. I picked up the frame and whispered aloud, "Who are you?" Not to the man in the picture, to myself. Because I no longer recognized the woman who spent years ignoring warning signs to preserve peace. That afternoon, I drove to a small electronics store nearly 40 minutes from our neighborhood. I paid cash for 3 USB drives. Then I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel while panic suddenly flooded my chest so violently I could barely breathe. What was I doing? My husband was powerful, connected, respected. If this exploded publicly, people wouldn't automatically believe me. Women my age are often dismissed as bitter, emotional unstable after infidelity. And Daniel understood reputation management better than anyone. He'd spent decades building public trust. I sat there trembling until another thought cut through the fear. If I stayed silent, he could destroy me first. That truth steadied me immediately. By evening, I had copied nearly every file I could access from memory and screenshots. But I needed more. I needed legal protection. Carefully, I contacted an attorney I hadn't spoken to in years, Rebecca Stein. We once worked together during a hospital compliance investigation nearly 2 decades earlier. Rebecca had since become one of Chicago's most respected white-collar defense attorneys. I called from a grocery store parking lot. She answered on the third ring. Lauren, hearing an old colleague say my name instead of Mom or Mrs. Gibson, nearly broke me emotionally. "Hi, Rebecca," I said softly. "I need confidential advice." Her tone changed immediately. "What happened?" I looked around the empty parking lot before speaking. "I think my husband may be involved in financial fraud, connected to a charitable foundation." Silence. Then carefully, and I think he used my credentials. Rebecca inhaled sharply. "When can you meet?" We arranged a private consultation 2 days later. After hanging up, I cried for the first time since discovering the affair. Not because of Daniel, not even because of Vanessa, because speaking the truth aloud made everything real. When I got home that night, Daniel was cooking pasta in the kitchen. Cooking, as if we were still ordinary people living an ordinary life. He smiled when I walked in. "There's my beautiful wife." Beautiful wife. The performance never stopped. While we ate dinner, Daniel talked about gala preparations. Vanessa this, donors that, community partnerships. I listened carefully now. Not emotionally, professionally. That was when I noticed another change in him. Overconfidence. Daniel truly believed he controlled every variable around him. He thought wealth insulated him. He thought status protected him. He thought my loyalty guaranteed silence, and perhaps worst of all, he thought aging had made me soft. After dinner, he stepped outside to take a phone call. I watched him through the kitchen window, pacing near the patio, while speaking quietly. A few seconds later, my own phone lit up with a text from Vanessa. "Miss you. We need coffee soon." I stared at the heart emoji so long, my vision blurred. Then something inside me shifted permanently. Until that moment, part of me still wanted answers, an explanation, maybe even remorse. But suddenly, I understood neither of them felt remorse at all. They felt safe. Safe enough to lie directly to my face while standing inside my home. Safe enough to involve me in criminal activity without my consent. Safe enough to assume I'd absorb humiliation quietly because older women are expected to preserve dignity instead of demanding justice. I deleted Vanessa's message. Then I opened my encrypted email account and sent copies of the evidence to myself again. Multiple backups. Multiple locations. The old auditor in me had fully awakened now. And the more evidence I reviewed, the more certain I became of something chilling. Daniel and Vanessa hadn't just made one bad decision. This had been going on for years. The affair, the fraud, the manipulation, everything. I sat alone in my office, close to midnight, reviewing documents while rain battered the windows outside. And for the first time since my marriage collapsed, I stopped feeling helpless, because grief is powerful. But preparation is power. And Daniel Gibson had absolutely no idea who he was about to go to war with. 3 days before the gala, Vanessa came to my house carrying lemon pastries from my favorite bakery. I almost admired the cruelty of it. She arrived smiling warmly in a cream-colored wool coat, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the Chicago wind outside. To anyone watching, she looked like the ideal, lifelong friend checking in on someone she loved. "Lauren," she said brightly as I opened the door, "I was worried about you." Worried? The word nearly made me choke, but I stepped aside anyway. "Come in." Vanessa walked into my home with complete confidence. That was the part that haunted me most during those weeks, not just the betrayal, but the comfort. She didn't act nervous. She didn't avoid me. She acted like she belonged there. Maybe because for decades she had. She placed the pastry box on the kitchen counter and hugged me tightly. I forced myself not to recoil when I smelled her perfume, the same perfume I'd smelled lingering faintly on Daniel's scarf 2 weeks earlier. "You look tired," she said gently, studying my face. I shrugged. "Haven't been sleeping." "Oh, honey." Her voice softened with fake concern. "You've always carried stress in your face." I stared at her for a second too long, because suddenly I remembered sitting beside this woman in hospital waiting rooms when her mother died. I remembered helping her through divorce papers. I remembered defending her to people who called her manipulative years ago. And now she stood in my kitchen lying to my face while sleeping with my husband. It's strange what betrayal does to memory. It rewrites everything retroactively. We sat in the living room with coffee while soft jazz played from the kitchen speaker. Snow drifted outside the windows in lazy white waves, making the house feel almost peaceful. Vanessa crossed her legs elegantly on the couch. "How's Daniel handling gala stress?" she asked casually. There it was, the tiny test. I kept my expression neutral. "You know Daniel. He thrives on pressure." She smiled knowingly. "Oh, I know." The way she said it made my stomach turn. For a few minutes, she chatted about meaningless things. Donors, charity auction items, a new Italian restaurant downtown. But underneath every word, tension pulsed invisibly between us. I started noticing details the old Lauren would have ignored. The confidence in her posture. the ease in her voice, the subtle way she scanned my face carefully after mentioning Daniel. She was evaluating me, trying to determine whether I suspected anything. And suddenly, I realized something important. Vanessa wasn't visiting to comfort me. She was gathering information. That realization sharpened my focus instantly. Earlier that morning, I had placed my phone beneath a decorative pillow on the armchair across from us with the audio recorder running. Not because I expected a confession, but because experienced investigators understand something simple. People reveal themselves when they feel safe. And Vanessa felt very safe. At one point, she reached for her coffee cup, and the sleeve of her coat shifted slightly upward. My breath caught immediately. Around her neck rested the diamond necklace Daniel bought me for our 30th anniversary. Technically, it still belonged to me. I had stopped wearing it years ago because the clasp irritated my skin. 2 months earlier, Vanessa admired it during dinner at our house. "It's gorgeous," she'd said. And now she wore it casually while sitting in my living room. I felt physically cold. "You still have that necklace?" I said quietly. Vanessa touched it, automatically smiling. "Oh!" She laughed lightly. "I forgot I even had it on." Forgot. The nerve of her nearly stunned me. "I thought it looked familiar," I said carefully. For the first time all afternoon, something flickered in her eyes. Not guilt, alarm. Tiny, brief, but real. Then she recovered immediately. "You gave it to me last spring, remember? Said you never wore it anymore." That part was true. I had given it to her because I trusted her, because I loved her, because I thought she was family. And suddenly, the necklace around her throat looked less like jewelry and more like a trophy. Vanessa changed the subject quickly after that. So she said casually, "Daniel mentioned you've been spending more time in your office lately." I nearly froze. "Careful, Lauren. Very careful." "Oh," I smiled lightly. "I've been reorganizing old financial files. Retirement makes people strange." She watched me closely. "Must be nostalgic. You'd be surprised what you find in old records." That landed. I saw it immediately. A tiny hesitation. Just enough. Vanessa lifted her coffee cup too quickly afterward. The old auditor inside me awakened completely in moments like these. Most people think deception announces itself dramatically. It doesn't. It appears in pauses. Eye movements, overcorrections, silence lasting half a second too long. And Vanessa suddenly looked very interested in my office work. "So you're reviewing old hospital documents?" she asked casually. "Mostly tax stuff. Makes sense. Too fast. Too rehearsed." I leaned back carefully. "You know," I said softly, "sometimes I miss auditing." Vanessa smiled politely, but her shoulders tightened almost invisibly. "Really? Oh yes. You learn fascinating things about people through money." There it was again. That flicker. Fear. Very small, but finally visible. For the next hour we danced around each other conversationally, like two women holding knives beneath a dinner table. Vanessa kept probing indirectly. Had I spoken to Daniel lately about finances? Was I attending the gala? Had I been in contact with old hospital colleagues? Meanwhile, I answered gently, while feeding her almost nothing. And the longer we talked, the more something horrifying became obvious to me. Vanessa genuinely believed she was smarter than me. Not smarter emotionally, smarter entirely. She viewed me as outdated, harmless, aging, a wife who existed in the background while important people handled real business. At one point, she reached over and squeezed my hand. "You know I love you, right?" That almost broke me. Because once upon a time, I would have believed her instantly. Instead, I looked at the woman who helped destroy my marriage and quietly asked myself a question I couldn't stop thinking about afterward. How long had she secretly hated me? You don't betray someone like this accidentally. Not over months, not over years. There has to be envy somewhere underneath it. Resentment, competition, something poisonous hidden beneath friendship. Eventually, Vanessa stood to leave. At the front door, she hugged me again. And then she said something that changed everything. "You're lucky to have Daniel Lauren," she whispered softly. "Men like him don't stay loyal to women forever." I felt the world tilt slightly beneath my feet. Because that wasn't comfort. That was a warning. No. Worse. It was ownership. Vanessa was telling me Daniel already belonged to her. And somehow she expected me to accept it quietly. I smiled calmly anyway. "You'd be surprised what people are capable of," I replied. For a split second, we simply stared at each other. Then she smiled again and walked out into the falling snow. The moment her car disappeared down the street, my knees nearly gave out beneath me. I locked the front door and leaned against it, breathing hard. Then I walked directly to the armchair, picked up my phone, and replayed the recording. Listening to Vanessa's voice inside my own house made my skin crawl. But halfway through the audio, I caught something important, a detail most people would miss. While discussing gala preparations, Vanessa casually mentioned Daniel's hotel suite preferences for donor events. Except Daniel had never publicly booked donor suites. Those arrangements were private executive details. There was no innocent reason for her to know them. And hearing that confirmation aloud, hearing evidence of intimacy hidden inside ordinary conversation, hardened something permanently inside me. By the time the recording ended, I no longer felt like a wounded wife. I felt like a prosecutor building a case. And Vanessa Carter had just handed me another piece of evidence herself. 2 days before the gala, my daughter looked at me for exactly 3 seconds and knew something was terribly wrong. That's the thing about children. Even when they're grown adults with careers and mortgages and lives of their own, they still recognize the sound of pain in their mother's voice faster than anyone else in the world. Olivia arrived at the house unexpectedly around 6 in the evening, carrying Thai takeout and a bottle of red wine. "I come bearing noodles and emotional support," she announced while stepping inside. Normally, I would have laughed. Instead, I forced a smile that clearly didn't convince her. Olivia stopped in the middle of the foyer and stared at me carefully. "Mom, I'm fine." That sentence has literally never meant you're fine. I turned away too quickly. Bad move. Because Olivia Gibson had inherited both my observational instincts and Daniel's relentless focus. At 34, she was already one of the sharpest corporate attorneys in Chicago. And unfortunately for me, she knew exactly how to read people. She followed me into the kitchen slowly. "What happened?" "Nothing, Mom." I busied myself unpacking containers unnecessarily. Pad Thai, spring rolls, rice, anything to avoid eye contact. Then Olivia quietly asked the question that shattered me. "Did Dad do something I froze?" Just for a second. But that second was enough. Olivia's entire expression changed. "Oh my God," she whispered. I still tried to protect him, even then, after everything. "Sweetheart, it's complicated. Did he cheat on you?" The room went silent. I looked down at the kitchen counter because I couldn't bear the devastation already forming in my daughter's eyes. And somehow, after days of holding myself together, that was the moment I finally broke. Not when I saw Daniel kiss Vanessa. Not when I found the forged documents. Not when I uncovered the emails. It happened there in my kitchen, while my daughter stood in front of me looking heartbroken on my behalf. I started crying so hard, I could barely breathe. Olivia rushed toward me immediately. "Oh my God, Mom!" She wrapped her arms around me while I shook violently against her shoulder like a child. And through tears, humiliation, and exhaustion, I finally whispered the truth aloud. It's Vanessa. Everything about Olivia went still. Then slowly, she pulled back and stared at me in disbelief. Aunt Vanessa. I nodded. No! Her voice cracked sharply. No! No, Mom! I could see her trying to reject reality in real time, because Vanessa had practically helped raise her. She attended Olivia's dance recitals, her law school graduation, Christmas mornings. Vanessa wasn't just my best friend. She was woven into our family history. How long? Olivia whispered. I don't know. And Dad, I laughed bitterly through tears. Oh, he's very committed to the performance. Olivia sat down heavily at the kitchen table, looking physically sick. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then quietly, I told her everything. The hotel, the emails, the affair, the foundation money, the forged approvals. That part changed the entire atmosphere instantly. Olivia's grief transformed into razor-sharp focus. Wait, she said carefully. He used your credentials? Yes. Mom? She stared at me with growing alarm. Do you understand how dangerous that is? I nodded weakly. I think so. No. Olivia leaned forward. You don't. If this becomes public and they need someone to blame, they could pin this entire thing on you. The words hit me like ice water, because deep down, I already feared that possibility. Olivia stood and started pacing immediately, lawyer instincts fully activated. Do you have copies? Yes. Backups? Yes. Multiple yes. Good. For the first time in days, I saw certainty replace panic inside someone else's eyes. Olivia wasn't emotional the way I was. She was strategic. You cannot confront him yet, she said firmly. I know. You absolutely cannot warn Vanessa. I know. And from this point forward, you document everything. I stared at my daughter in shock. Somewhere along the line, while I was busy protecting everyone emotionally, Olivia had become formidable. I already contacted an attorney, I admitted quietly. That made her stop pacing. Who, Rebecca Stein? Olivia blinked in surprise. Mom, Rebecca is one of the best defense attorneys in the city. I know. For the first time all night, a tiny smile appeared on Olivia's face. Okay, she said softly. Good. We sat together at the kitchen table for hours afterward, reviewing timelines. Dates, transfers, gala schedules. Olivia read through screenshots with increasing disbelief. At one point, she muttered quietly, Dad really thought he could get away with this forever. He still thinks he can? That was the horrifying part. Daniel genuinely believed his reputation protected him, and maybe it had for years, but Olivia understood something I was only beginning to realize. Public men survive scandals all the time. Financial evidence is much harder to escape. Around 10 o'clock, headlights flashed through the front windows. Daniel was home. My entire body tensed instantly. Olivia noticed. That alone enraged her, because daughters should never watch their mothers fear the sound of their own husband entering the driveway. Act normal? I whispered quickly. Olivia's jaw tightened. I don't know if I can. You have to. Daniel walked inside moments later, carrying his leather briefcase and smiling casually. There are my girls. Girls. God. He looked so ordinary, so harmless. Meanwhile, he was sleeping with my best friend and forging my authorization credentials behind my back. Olivia stood stiffly near the kitchen island. Daniel frowned slightly. Everything okay? Then Olivia did something that almost gave me a heart attack. She looked directly at him and said, How's Vanessa? Silence. Tiny, brief, but devastating. Daniel recovered quickly. She's stressed about gala prep, he answered smoothly. Olivia stared at him for one long second too many. And suddenly, I realized something chilling. Daniel couldn't read Olivia the way he read me. He still viewed her as his daughter. Not as a lawyer. Not as a threat. Big mistake. During dinner, Olivia barely spoke. I could feel anger radiating off her like heat from a furnace. Meanwhile, Daniel chatted casually about donor seating arrangements and auction sponsors as if our family wasn't quietly collapsing beneath the table. At one point, he reached over and squeezed my hand affectionately. I nearly flinched. Olivia noticed. So did Daniel. A shadow crossed his face briefly. Suspicion. Small, but present. After dinner, Olivia helped me clean dishes, while Daniel answered emails in his office upstairs. The second he disappeared, she whispered sharply. He knows something's off. I know. You need to be careful. Then her voice softened. Mom? If this goes public, people are going to be cruel. I looked down at the sink quietly. I know. No. Olivia touched my arm gently. I mean about your age. That hurt because it was true. Society humiliates older women differently after betrayal. People pity us, mock us, ask how we failed to keep our husbands interested. Meanwhile, men like Daniel get called complicated, powerful, tempted. Olivia's eyes filled with tears suddenly. I swear to God, Mom, if he hurts you financially, he already did. Silence settled heavily between us. Then Olivia said something I never forgot. Dad underestimated the wrong woman. Not Vanessa. Not the hospital board. Me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I started to believe that too. Later that night, after Olivia left, I stood alone in the dark kitchen, staring at family photos on the refrigerator. Birthdays, vacations, college graduations. An entire lifetime built around loyalty. And upstairs, my husband slept peacefully, believing he still controlled the story. What Daniel Gibson didn't understand yet was simple. He hadn't just betrayed his wife. He had awakened the most dangerous version of her. The gala was 4 days away when I finally understood exactly how I wanted to destroy them. Not emotionally, not impulsively, not by screaming in public or throwing wine in Vanessa's face like some dramatic scene from a television show. No, I wanted something much colder than revenge. I wanted the truth placed directly in front of the people whose opinions Daniel and Vanessa valued most. Powerful people don't fear heartbreak. They fear exposure. And the Lakeshore Medical Foundation Winter Gala was the perfect stage. Every year, the event attracted Chicago's wealthiest donors, hospital board members, journalists, and influential community leaders. Politicians attended. Corporate sponsors attended. Local media photographed everything from the red carpet arrivals to the closing speeches. This year mattered even more because Daniel was scheduled to receive the Community Leadership Excellence Award. Vanessa would introduce him personally. The irony almost made me laugh. For days, I sat in my office building timelines while snowstorms rolled across the city outside my windows. My printer worked nonstop. Files covered nearly every surface of the room. Emails, transaction histories, hotel invoices, fraudulent approvals, expense reports disguised as donor outreach. I organized everything carefully into chronological folders. Rebecca Stein reviewed copies privately and confirmed what I already suspected. This is serious, she told me during our confidential meeting downtown. We sat inside her office overlooking Michigan Avenue while evening traffic glowed below us. Could they prosecute? I asked quietly. Rebecca nodded slowly. Potentially, especially if donor funds were knowingly misused. I stared down at my hands, and my name Rebecca's expression softened slightly. The forged timestamps help you significantly. Also, your documentation timeline works in your favor, meaning you started preserving evidence before confrontation. She leaned back carefully. That was smart, Lauren. Smart. I almost cried hearing that word, because for weeks I had felt discarded, old, replaceable. But sitting across from Rebecca reminded me I wasn't helpless. I was prepared. There's one more thing, Rebecca said carefully. What? If Daniel realizes you know about the financial records before safeguards are in place, he may attempt damage control. I understood immediately. Delete files, shift blame, destroy evidence, protect himself. Then he can't know, I whispered. Rebecca nodded. Exactly. That was the moment the gala stopped being an emotional fantasy and became an operational plan. Over the next several days, Olivia helped me secure duplicate evidence in multiple locations. One encrypted drive stayed with Rebecca. Another remained hidden in a safe deposit box downtown. A third stayed locked inside my office. Paranoia, maybe. But I knew men like Daniel, and desperate people become dangerous. Meanwhile, Daniel floated through the house completely unaware. That part still amazes me. He discussed tuxedo fittings over breakfast while I quietly prepared the collapse of his career. One evening, he even asked my opinion about his acceptance speech. I don't want to sound arrogant, he said while adjusting his tie in the mirror. I looked at my husband, this man who had betrayed me for years, and calmly replied, "You've always sounded very sincere." He smiled proudly. God, the performance never ended. Vanessa became increasingly visible during those days too. She called frequently about gala logistics and sent group texts filled with cheerful exclamation points. Every message made my skin crawl. But something else changed underneath my anger. The closer the gala approached, the calmer I became. Not happier, not less hurt, just focused. People imagine revenge feels explosive, emotional. For me, it felt almost surgical. By Thursday evening, I had finalized the guest list seating chart in my head more carefully than the organizers themselves probably had. Ethan Brooks, senior board member, would sit near the front beside two major donors. Marcus Hale, the investigative journalist Olivia quietly recommended, had accepted a last-minute invitation after receiving anonymous preliminary documents from Rebecca. 3 additional board members would already possess sealed copies of the evidence before Daniel's speech even began. I wasn't walking into that ballroom hoping people believed me. I was walking in prepared. Friday afternoon, I drove downtown alone to pick up my gown from a boutique near the river. The saleswoman smiled warmly when I stepped out of the fitting room. "Oh, Lauren," she said. "You look incredible." I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The dress was midnight black with elegant long sleeves and a fitted silhouette that made me look taller somehow. Stronger, not younger. I no longer cared about younger. For weeks, Vanessa's betrayal had awakened every insecurity aging women carry silently inside themselves. The fear of becoming invisible, replaceable, less desired. But standing there in that dress, I realized something important. Power doesn't belong only to youth. There's a different kind of power women earn after surviving enough life, and Daniel had forgotten that. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom after Daniel fell asleep reviewing the final gala schedule. Reception cocktails, auction announcements, dinner service, Vanessa's speech, Daniel's award presentation. Then spouses invited to stage acknowledgement. That part mattered, because Daniel himself had insisted the event coordinator invite me on stage beside him. He wanted the image of devoted husband and loyal wife displayed publicly. Perfect. I closed the schedule and stared across the dark room at the man sleeping beside me. For 35 years, I had built my life around protecting this family, protecting Daniel's reputation, protecting peace. protecting appearances. And now I finally understood something painful. People like Daniel survive because women like me absorb the damage quietly. Not anymore. The next morning, Olivia arrived carrying coffee and legal folders. She looked exhausted. "You slept at all?" I asked. "Barely." Neither had I. We sat in my office reviewing contingency plans like attorneys preparing for trial. "If Dad panics publicly, don't engage emotionally," Olivia warned. "I know. If he accuses you directly, Rebecca steps in immediately. I know. And Mom?" She hesitated carefully. "Once this starts, there's no undoing it." I looked toward the window where gray snow clouds hung low over Chicago. "I know that too." That truth haunted me more than anything else. Because despite the betrayal, despite the fraud, despite everything, I still loved the version of Daniel I thought existed for most of my life. Grief doesn't disappear simply because anger arrives. Sometimes they sit beside each other. That afternoon, Daniel came home unexpectedly early, carrying champagne. "We should celebrate tomorrow night," he said cheerfully. "Biggest gala we've ever had. Tomorrow night." The words echoed strangely inside me. He walked over and kissed my forehead gently. "I couldn't have built any of this without you, Lauren." I almost broke right there, because once upon a time I would have believed him completely. Instead, I smiled softly and whispered, "You're right about that." Later that evening, after Daniel went upstairs, I stood alone in the kitchen holding the champagne bottle he brought home. A celebration. That's what he thought tomorrow would be. He had absolutely no idea that by the end of the gala, his entire life would begin collapsing in front of everyone who mattered most to him. And the most terrifying part. For the first time since discovering the affair, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. The morning of the gala began with silence. Not peaceful silence. The kind that settles over a house when two people are pretending everything is still normal, while standing on opposite sides of a cliff neither has acknowledged yet. Daniel stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting his cufflinks, while I sat at the vanity brushing my hair slowly. "You excited for tonight?" he asked casually. "Excited." I watched his reflection carefully. He looked confident, relaxed, successful. A man preparing to receive public admiration. And suddenly, I wondered whether evil always looked ordinary from this close. "I'm looking forward to it," I answered calmly. Daniel smiled faintly. "Good. I know these events aren't exactly your favorite anymore." Anymore. That word lingered strangely between us, because what he really meant was older women become background decorations at events like these. Supportive wives, smiling accessories, invisible. Except I wasn't invisible anymore. Not tonight. Daniel left for the hospital shortly after breakfast, but something felt different about him that morning. Sharper, more observant. Twice I caught him watching me too carefully. Once while I poured coffee, again while I checked my phone. Tiny moments, but after decades together, I knew his instincts were awakening. He sensed movement beneath the surface, even if he didn't understand it yet. Around noon, I received a text from Olivia. "Be careful. Dad called me this morning." My stomach tightened immediately. "What did he say?" "He asked whether you seemed stressed lately." I stared at the message for several seconds. Then another appeared. "He's suspicious about something." That changed the entire atmosphere of the day. Until then, I believed I controlled the timeline completely. Now I realized Daniel's survival instincts might finally be activating. I immediately went upstairs to my office and reviewed every backup location again. Encrypted drives, printed copies, email archives. Everything remained secure. Still unease crawled through me. At 1:17 p.m., Daniel came home unexpectedly. That never happened on gala days. Never. The moment I heard the garage door opening, adrenaline flooded my body so violently I nearly dropped the folder in my hands. Think. Fast. I slid documents into the locked desk drawer seconds before Daniel entered the office doorway. "There you are," he said lightly. Too lightly. I forced a smile. "You're home early. Forgot some files." But he didn't move toward his office immediately. Instead, he stood there studying me. "You've been spending a lot of time up here lately?" My pulse hammered painfully. "Reorganizing old paperwork." There it was again. That tiny pause. Suspicion. Then his eyes drifted toward my desk. Toward the locked drawer. A dangerous silence settled between us. After 35 years together, Daniel knew exactly when I was hiding something. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized he might finally understand that his wife was no longer passive. "What kind of paperwork?" he asked casually. I shrugged. Retirement accounts, tax files, old audits. The word audits landed hard. I saw it immediately. A flicker behind his eyes. Gone, almost instantly. But not fast enough. Daniel smiled again. "You always did love organizing things." I smiled back, "and you always underestimated how useful that can be." For one long second, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel laughed softly, like I'd made a harmless joke. But I could feel the tension thickening in the room. He walked over and kissed my forehead gently. "I'll grab my files and head back." I nodded. The moment he disappeared into his office downstairs, I quietly moved toward the hallway. Then I heard it. Desk drawers opening rapidly. Cabinet doors, keyboard typing, not relaxed searching, panicked searching. My entire body went cold. Daniel knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. I returned to my office silently and waited. 20 minutes later, he reappeared, looking calm again. Too calm. "I found what I needed," he said, but his smile no longer reached his eyes. After he left the house again, I immediately went downstairs to his office. The room looked normal at first glance. Then I noticed the desk drawer slightly misaligned. He'd searched it too quickly. I opened the drawer carefully. Inside sat the decoy USB drive I intentionally planted 2 days earlier. Gone. My heartbeat slowed strangely. So, Daniel had taken the bait. The fake drive contained harmless financial summaries and old archived reports, nothing damaging, nothing illegal, nothing useful. But Daniel didn't know that. And the fact he stole it confirmed everything I needed to understand. He was scared. For the first time in weeks, genuine satisfaction moved through me. Not joy. Something colder. Because now I knew Daniel was no longer operating confidently. He was reacting. That meant mistakes were coming. At 3:42 p.m., Vanessa called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Lauren." Her voice sounded overly cheerful. "Ready for tonight almost?" "You sound tired." "I didn't sleep much." A pause. Then carefully. "Everything okay?" Another test. I leaned against the kitchen counter quietly. "You know," I said softly, "I've been thinking a lot about trust lately." Silence. Tiny, but noticeable. "What do you mean?" she asked carefully. "I think people are capable of surprising things." Vanessa laughed too quickly. "Well, after this many years, nothing surprises me anymore." Liar. We exchanged a few more meaningless comments before hanging up. But something about her voice unsettled me. Not confidence this time. Nervousness. Which meant Daniel probably contacted her already. Good. Let them panic. At 5 o'clock, Olivia arrived to help me get ready for the gala. The moment she stepped into my bedroom, she read my expression instantly. What happened? I told her about Daniel searching the office. Her face hardened immediately. He's trying to figure out what you know. I know. Did he find anything? Number. Olivia exhaled slowly. Good. While she helped zip my gown, she studied me in the mirror carefully. You sure you're ready for this? I looked at my reflection. The black gown, the diamond earrings, the calm expression hiding weeks of devastation underneath it all. No, I admitted honestly, but I'm done being afraid. Olivia squeezed my shoulder gently. That's enough. Downstairs, Daniel waited in his tuxedo holding 2 champagne glasses. For a moment, the sight nearly shattered me emotionally. Because he still looked like the man I once loved. That was the cruelest part of long marriages. The monster and the memory wear the same face. You look beautiful, Daniel said softly as I descended the staircase. And maybe once upon a time he truly meant things like that. Tonight, I simply smiled politely. You look nervous. That caught him off guard. Nervous, a little. Daniel laughed lightly. Big night. Yes, it certainly was. The drive downtown felt endless. Chicago glittered outside the windows while snow drifted across Michigan Avenue under golden streetlights. Daniel checked his phone constantly. Messages from Vanessa, board members, event staff. Every vibration seemed to tighten his shoulders further. Good. By the time the ballroom came into view ahead of us, glowing with crystal chandeliers and television cameras, my fear had almost completely disappeared. Because suddenly I understood something clearly. Daniel thought tonight was about protecting his reputation, but tonight was no longer about him. Tonight was about truth. And truth has a way of becoming uncontrollable once it finally enters the room. The ballroom looked like something designed to distract people from reality. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead like frozen stars. White orchids covered the tables. Waiters in black jackets moved through the crowd, carrying champagne trays, while a jazz quartet played softly near the stage. Everything shimmered. Money always does. Daniel immediately transformed the second we stepped inside. His posture straightened, his smile sharpened. His public face emerged. People flooded toward us almost instantly. Daniel, Lauren, you look stunning. Tonight's your night board members shook Daniel's hand while donors praised the foundation's success. Women kissed my cheek warmly. Cameras flashed constantly near the entrance, and through all of it I kept thinking the same thing. None of these people know who he really is. Vanessa spotted us from across the ballroom almost immediately. She wore a dark emerald gown that hugged her figure elegantly, her blonde hair swept over one shoulder. Around her neck rested my diamond necklace again. That detail no longer hurt me. Now, it simply disgusted me. Lauren, she said brightly while approaching, you look incredible. She air-kissed my cheek like we were still best friends. Daniel stood beside her naturally, comfortably, like the three of us existed inside some twisted performance none of them expected me to interrupt. Vanessa touched Daniel's arm lightly while discussing seating arrangements. Tiny gesture, almost invisible. But once you know the truth, every touch becomes unbearable to witness. You two make such a beautiful couple, a donor's wife told us warmly. Vanessa smiled. Daniel smiled, and I smiled too, because none of them realized the bomb had already been planted long before tonight began. Across the ballroom, I spotted Marcus Hale speaking quietly with Ethan Brooks near the bar. Good. Everything was moving exactly as planned. For the first hour, I simply observed. That part mattered. I wanted to see them relaxed, confident. I wanted Daniel and Vanessa to fully enjoy the illusion of safety before it disappeared forever. And the more I watched them, the more something ugly revealed itself underneath their behavior. Not love. Possession. Vanessa looked at Daniel the way ambitious people look at expensive things they finally acquired. Meanwhile, Daniel behaved like a man intoxicated by admiration, power, attention, control. At one point during cocktails, I excused myself to the restroom. Except I didn't go there. Instead, I walked quietly toward a private hallway near the ballroom offices where event staff stored programs and schedules. And there exactly where Olivia predicted Vanessa was waiting, alone. The moment she saw me, her smile faded slightly. "There you are," she said softly. Something in her voice had changed. Less warmth now, more calculation. "You disappeared," I replied calmly. Vanessa crossed her arms loosely. "I wanted a private moment with you before the ceremony starts." Of course she did, because predators prefer privacy before delivering warnings. The hallway felt strangely cold compared to the warmth of the ballroom outside. Muffled music drifted faintly through the walls while staff members hurried past occasionally carrying floral arrangements or trays. Vanessa studied me carefully. "You've seemed distant lately." I smiled faintly. "Have I?" "Yes." There it was again. Testing. Probing. Trying to determine what I knew. "You know," she continued softly, "I've been worried about you." I almost laughed. Instead, I asked quietly, why Vanessa hesitated. Very slight, but enough. "I think you've seemed unhappy for a while." Unhappy. Interesting choice of word. Not suspicious, not upset, unhappy. As though she was slowly preparing a narrative, I leaned against the wall calmly. "Marriage changes after 35 years?" Vanessa nodded slowly. "Yes. Sometimes people outgrow each other." There it was. The justification. The rehearsed morality people use when they betray someone decent. Not cruelty, not selfishness. Growth. I stared directly at her. "And did Daniel tell you that the silence afterward stretched painfully long?" Vanessa recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. "You know, Daniel and I work closely together," she said carefully. "Very closely." Another flicker crossed her face. Fear now. Real fear. Because for the first time, she understood I wasn't speaking blindly anymore. She stepped closer toward me, lowering her voice. "Lauren, I think you deserve honesty." The audacity of that sentence almost took my breath away. Honesty. From the woman sleeping with my husband behind my back for years. I folded my hands carefully to stop them trembling. "Then be honest." Vanessa inhaled slowly, and then she did something I never expected. She stopped pretending entirely. Not fully, but enough. "I think Daniel has been lonely for a long time," she said softly. The hallway suddenly felt very quiet, very far away. "He admires strength," she continued. "Passion, connection." I stared at her in disbelief. Was she actually rationalizing this to me? "You're blaming me?" I whispered. "No." Her expression softened artificially. "I'm saying people change." That's when I finally saw it clearly. Vanessa didn't feel guilty because she genuinely believed she deserved my life more than I did. My husband, my social position, my future. Women like Vanessa never think they steal. They think they upgrade. "You know what's interesting?" I said quietly. "What you used to cry in my kitchen about women who betrayed you. That landed. Hard." Her jaw tightened slightly. "That's different." "Why?" "Because my ex-husband humiliated me publicly." I almost smiled at the irony. Public humiliation. Interesting choice of words considering what tonight was about to become. Vanessa stepped even closer. Lauren listened to me carefully. There it was. The threat beneath the concern. "You don't want drama tonight," she said softly. "Not at your age. At your age." There it was, finally spoken aloud. The cruel little truth hiding underneath everything. Too old, too fragile, too replaceable. Vanessa continued carefully. People can be unforgiving, especially publicly. And Daniel? She paused. Well, he's still highly respected. Translation. Nobody important would choose me over him. Nobody would believe the aging wife over the powerful executive. I looked at the woman I once called my sister and realized something chilling. She truly believed she had already won. Not because Daniel loved her, because she thought I was weak. Then Vanessa made her final mistake. You still have your dignity, Lauren, she whispered. Don't lose it over anger. Dignity. Older women are always told to preserve dignity quietly while other people destroy their lives. I smiled at her slowly. You seem very confident tonight. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. I just think some truths hurt more than silence. Oh, Vanessa, if only you knew. I leaned toward her gently and said the sentence that finally cracked her composure. You should be very careful about which truths come out tonight. Everything about her face changed instantly. Not dramatically, just enough. The blood drained slightly from her expression. Fear. Finally. Real fear. Before she could respond, voices approached from the ballroom entrance. Event staff hurried past carrying auction paperwork. Vanessa recovered quickly. You're upset, she said coldly. I understand that. Then she walked away, but her heels moved faster now, and for the first time all evening I realized something important. Daniel suspected danger. Vanessa felt danger. Neither of them understood the scale of it yet. Good. Because the worst moment of destruction isn't when the bomb explodes. It's the few seconds beforehand. When people suddenly realize too late, they were never in control at all. And as I walked back toward the glowing ballroom, where Daniel stood laughing beside wealthy donors under crystal chandeliers, I finally understood something with complete certainty. By the end of this night, neither of them would ever recover completely. Dinner service began at precisely 7:30. By then, the ballroom glowed with soft gold light and expensive laughter. Crystal glasses clinked. Donors discussed investments over filet mignon and red wine, while cameras flashed near the stage backdrop displaying the Lakeshore Medical Foundation logo. Everything looked perfect. That's what made it beautiful and tragic, because perfection is easiest to destroy when people stop expecting danger. Daniel sat beside me at the head table, smiling confidently, while Vanessa moved elegantly between guests, greeting donors like royalty. She had recovered from our hallway conversation well enough to resume performing, but I noticed things others couldn't. The stiffness in her shoulders, how often she scanned the room, the way her smile faded for half a second whenever our eyes met. Good. Fear had entered the room now. Across the ballroom, Marcus Hale sat quietly near the back, reviewing something on his phone. Ethan Brooks leaned toward another board member speaking in low tones. More good signs. The evidence packets had already begun circulating privately, and Daniel still had no idea. Halfway through dinner, he leaned closer toward me. You've been very quiet tonight. I sipped water calmly, just taking everything in. His eyes searched my face carefully. You sure everything's okay? That question almost fascinated me. Not because he cared, because he was checking for threat levels, like a businessman monitoring risk exposure. I smiled faintly. Do you trust me, Daniel? The question visibly unsettled him. What do you trust me? A long pause stretched between us while music drifted softly from the stage. Of course I do, he answered carefully. Lie. I nodded slowly. That's interesting. Before he could respond, applause erupted across the ballroom as the MC stepped onto the stage, announcing the evening awards presentation. Daniel visibly relaxed. For now, the first hour of speeches moved smoothly. Community recognition, donor acknowledgments, hospital expansion updates. Vanessa eventually took the stage wearing a dazzling smile and holding a champagne-colored envelope in her hands. Tonight, she began warmly, "We celebrate leadership integrity and compassion." Integrity. The irony nearly burned my throat. The audience applauded politely, while Vanessa continued speaking about charitable impact and healthcare outreach. She sounded sincere. That was the frightening part. Some people lie so long they begin believing their own performance. Then she turned toward Daniel. "And there is no one who embodies those values more than Dr. Daniel Gibson." Thunderous applause exploded through the ballroom. Daniel stood gracefully smiling with practiced humility while cameras flashed around him. Vanessa looked at him with unmistakable admiration. Not lust. Worse. Pride, like she believed she helped build him. Maybe she thought she had. Daniel reached the stage and embraced her briefly, while the audience clapped louder. And suddenly, I noticed something strange. Vanessa whispered something in his ear during the hug. Daniel's smile flickered, just slightly. Then his eyes moved instinctively toward me. "Ah," so she told him. "Not everything, but enough to confirm danger existed. Interesting." Daniel approached the podium smoothly anyway. Years of executive leadership had trained him well. "Thank you," he began warmly. "Tonight truly belongs to everyone committed to improving lives across this city." His voice filled the ballroom effortlessly, confident, measured, respected. I watched people hanging on every word while anger twisted slowly inside my chest. Because Daniel wasn't stupid. He genuinely had helped people over the years. He funded programs, expanded services, raised millions for patient care. That's what complicated men do. They mix goodness with corruption until nobody can separate them clearly anymore. "I've been blessed," Daniel continued, "with extraordinary colleagues, extraordinary community partners." His eyes drifted toward Vanessa briefly. "And extraordinary family." Applause again. Then he looked directly at me. "My wife, Lauren, has stood beside me for 35 years. None of this would have been possible without her." The room erupted warmly. Cameras turned toward me instantly. People smiled. Some even wiped tears from their eyes. And I realized something devastating in that moment. Daniel truly believed he could still control the narrative through charm. Even now. Even tonight. He continued speaking about service and trust and ethical leadership, while board members quietly checked phones beneath tables, reading evidence summaries Olivia and Rebecca distributed earlier. I saw Ethan Brooks' face harden gradually. Another board member whispered urgently to someone beside him. Marcus Hale typed notes rapidly. The infection had started spreading beneath the surface of the room. But Daniel remained beautifully unaware. And most importantly, he concluded proudly, "I believe leadership begins with honesty." That line almost made me laugh aloud. The applause afterward was enormous. Standing ovation. Daniel smiled modestly while accepting the Crystal Award from the MC. Then came the moment he never saw coming. The MC stepped forward, smiling brightly. And now she announced we'd love to invite Lauren Gibson to say a few words about the man behind the title. There it was, the final doorway. Daniel turned toward me immediately. And for the first time all evening, I saw genuine uncertainty enter his face. Just a flicker, but enough. Because suddenly, he realized something terrifying. He had absolutely no idea what I might say. The ballroom applauded warmly while I stood slowly from my chair. My legs felt strangely steady. No shaking, no panic, only clarity. As I walked toward the stage, Hundreds of faces turned toward me expectantly. Donors, executives, board members, journalists, friends, people who had known me for decades, and somewhere inside that crowd stood the two people who betrayed me most completely. The stage lights felt hot against my skin as I approached the podium. Daniel stepped aside automatically to let me stand beside him. Close enough that I could smell his cologne. Close enough to remember every version of him I had ever loved. He leaned toward me slightly and whispered under the applause, "Lauren, what are you doing?" I looked directly into his eyes, and for the first time since discovering the affair, I let him see the truth. Not sadness, not confusion, not fear. Knowledge. Daniel's entire body stiffened instantly. The applause faded gradually as the room settled into silence, waiting for me to speak. I adjusted the microphone carefully. Across the ballroom, I saw Vanessa frozen near the front table, gripping her wineglass too tightly. Good. Let her feel it now. I looked out over the crowd, slowly. Then I began speaking softly. When you spend 35 years loving someone, the ballroom quieted completely. You learn to trust them with pieces of yourself you can never get back. Absolute silence now. Daniel stared at me motionlessly beside the podium. I continued calmly. You trust them with your youth, your loyalty, your sacrifices, your reputation. Several people shifted uncomfortably. They could feel something changing, not understand it yet, but feel it. And sometimes I said quietly, the people closest to you become the ones most capable of destroying you. Vanessa's face lost color instantly. Daniel moved closer toward me subtly. "Lauren?" he whispered sharply through clenched teeth. I ignored him, because the room no longer belonged to Daniel Gibson. It belonged to me. And for the first time in decades, everyone was finally about to hear the truth. You could feel the room changing, not loudly, not dramatically, just slowly enough for people to realize something was wrong before they understood exactly what it was. I stood beneath the ballroom lights, gripping the podium gently, while hundreds of eyes stared back at me. Daniel stood frozen beside me. Vanessa looked pale near the front tables. And for the first time in weeks, I felt completely calm. When you love someone for most of your adult life, I continued softly, you build your identity around trust. You believe loyalty matters. You believe friendship matters. The ballroom remained silent. No silverware clinking now. No whispered conversations. Only my voice. I believed those things for 35 years. Daniel leaned slightly closer toward me again. "Lauren," he whispered tightly. "Stop." I ignored him, because this moment no longer belonged to his reputation. It belonged to my truth. I looked directly at the audience, and unfortunately, sometimes the people we trust most become the people who damage us most completely. A ripple moved through the crowd. Confusion, discomfort, fear. People sensed this wasn't a sentimental spouse speech anymore. Daniel reached toward my arm subtly, not aggressively. Just enough to try controlling the situation physically without creating a scene. I stepped away from him calmly. That tiny movement changed everything. Suddenly, people noticed his expression. Not warm, not proud, panicked. And panic looks strange on powerful men. I discovered recently, I said carefully, that my husband has been involved in a long-term affair with someone I considered family. Gasps erupted immediately across the ballroom. Sharp, collective, violent. I heard someone drop a wine glass near the back tables. Daniel's face drained of color instantly. "Lauren." "No," I said quietly into the microphone. The room fell silent again. I turned slightly toward Vanessa. She knows who she is. Every head in the ballroom turned toward her at once. Vanessa looked frozen in place. For one horrifying second, nobody moved. Then whispers exploded everywhere. "Oh my God, is she talking about no way?" Vanessa stood abruptly. "This is inappropriate," she snapped sharply. "Interesting. Not denial, just outrage." Daniel grabbed my arm harder now. "Lauren, stop this immediately." His voice shook. There it was. Fear. Real fear. I looked down calmly at his hand gripping my wrist, then back at the audience. And unfortunately, I continued softly. The betrayal did not end with the affair. Absolute silence. Daniel let go of my arm immediately, because now he understood. Now he knew exactly where this was going. I opened the black leather folder resting beside the podium. The same folder I carried into the ballroom at the beginning of the night. Inside were printed copies of emails, transfers, receipts, and authorization records. I removed several pages carefully. For years, I said steadily, charitable funds connected to the Lakeshore Medical Foundation were used for unauthorized personal expenses. The room exploded into chaos instantly. Board members stood up. People started talking all at once. Vanessa actually stumbled backward slightly. Daniel's face transformed completely. Gone was the polished executive. Gone was the charming philanthropist. Now he looked like a trapped animal calculating exits. "That's a lie," he snapped suddenly. Too fast, too loud. I looked directly at him. "No," I replied calmly. "It isn't." Then I turned toward the audience again. I discovered fraudulent expense reimbursements, hotel charges, manipulated transfer records, and forged electronic approvals created using my credentials. Ethan Brooks stood up immediately from his table. "What exactly are you saying, Lauren?" His voice sounded stunned. I met his gaze directly. "I'm saying my name was attached to financial activity I did not authorize." Murmurs spread violently through the ballroom now. Phones appeared everywhere, people whispering, texting, recording. Daniel stepped toward the microphone aggressively. "She's upset," he said quickly to the crowd. "This is obviously emotional confusion." That was the moment Olivia stood up near the side tables. "No," she said clearly. "It's documented evidence." Every head turned toward her now. My daughter walked forward calmly, holding legal folders beneath one arm. Rebecca Stein followed several steps behind her. The shift in energy became immediate. Because suddenly, this no longer looked like emotional revenge. It looked legal, professional, prepared. Daniel saw Rebecca and visibly blanched. "Oh my God," someone whispered nearby. Vanessa looked genuinely terrified now. "Good." Olivia reached the stage and handed Ethan Brooks a sealed folder. "Copies have already been distributed privately to Foundation Legal Counsel and multiple board members," she said evenly. Daniel stared at her in disbelief. "Olivia, don't!" she snapped sharply. The pain in her voice nearly shattered me. Because no matter how composed she appeared, this was still her father standing exposed publicly in front of the city. Marcus Hale stood near the back, already speaking urgently into his phone. Likely with his editor. The story had officially escaped containment. Daniel tried again. "This is being wildly misrepresented." Then I interrupted him for the first time all night. "No, Daniel," I said quietly. "What's being misrepresented is your entire life." Silence crashed over the ballroom again. I removed another sheet from the folder. Hotel receipts, Palmer House, 2 guests, foundation account charges. I placed them directly onto the podium beneath the stage lights. Visible. Undeniable. "You told this room tonight that leadership begins with honesty," I said softly. "So let's finally be honest." Vanessa suddenly stepped forward. "This is cruel," she shouted. You're humiliating everyone because you're angry. I looked at her calmly. No, Vanessa. I'm exposing you because you used charity money while sleeping with my husband and forging financial approvals under my name. The room detonated again. Several donors stood immediately. One woman looked physically sick. Another board member grabbed his phone and hurried toward the exit. Vanessa's composure finally cracked completely. That's not true. But her voice sounded desperate now. Weak. Because somewhere deep down, she understood the same thing Daniel did. I wasn't improvising. I came prepared. Daniel lowered his voice, suddenly trying one final tactic. Lauren, he whispered urgently, please. We can handle this privately. Privately. That word almost made me laugh. Private, like the hotel rooms, the secret emails, the hidden transfers, the manipulation. Private only benefited people like him? I stepped closer toward him beneath the glaring ballroom lights. And quietly enough that only nearby tables could hear, I said, You should have thought about privacy before you involved my name in criminal fraud. Daniel's entire face collapsed. Not emotionally, strategically. Because at that exact moment, he realized something irreversible. This wasn't survivable through charm anymore. Ethan Brooks opened the evidence folder rapidly while several other board members gathered around him. The expressions on their faces changed page by page. Shock, confusion, horror, then anger. One donor near the front table stood abruptly. Are you telling me foundation money funded personal hotel suites? No one answered. Because no one needed to. The documents already had. I looked out across the ballroom one final time. At the cameras, the whispers, the shattered illusion. And suddenly, I understood something strange. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. For weeks, I imagined revenge would feel explosive. Instead, it felt like finally putting down something unbearably heavy. Daniel reached toward me again, weakly. But this time, not to control me. To steady himself, I stepped away before he could touch me. Then I looked directly into the audience and spoke the final words that ended the performance forever. I spent years protecting people who never protected me. Silence. Deep. Heavy. Permanent. And tonight, I said softly, I decided to stop. The ballroom collapsed into chaos within seconds. Not physical chaos. Something worse. Social chaos. The kind, powerful people fear most. Whispers spread like fire between tables, while donors checked phones, board members argued near the stage, and journalists rushed toward exits making urgent calls. Reputation was dying in real time. And Daniel Gibson knew it. I watched him standing beneath the stage lights, still clutching his Crystal Leadership Award, while his entire world unraveled around him. For one surreal moment, nobody seemed to know what to do next. Then, Ethan Brooks stepped forward. Daniel, he said carefully, we need to speak privately. Now. The authority in his voice changed everything. This was no longer marital drama. It was institutional crisis. Daniel tried one final smile. Professional, controlled. There's clearly been some misunderstanding. No one responded. Because even from several feet away, I could see the evidence folder trembling slightly in Ethan's hands. Daniel looked toward me desperately. Lauren, please. That word sounded different now. Not commanding. Begging. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not rage, nothing. That frightened me a little. Vanessa moved toward the stage quickly. This is insane, she snapped sharply. Lauren is emotionally unstable right now. Olivia stepped between us immediately. Careful, she warned coldly. Vanessa stared at her in disbelief. You're taking her side? That sentence told me everything about Vanessa's mindset, as if loyalty should still belong to her. Olivia's expression hardened into something I had never seen before. "No," she said quietly. "I'm taking the side of the truth." Meanwhile, across the ballroom, Marcus Hale was already interviewing guests near the entrance. Cameras appeared. Phones recorded openly now. The story had escaped completely. There would be no containing it by morning. Daniel understood that too. That's when he made his worst mistake of the night. He panicked. Lauren forged nothing, he snapped suddenly toward the board members. She had complete financial access for years. The entire room went still again, because now he wasn't denying the fraud anymore. He was shifting blame, directly onto me. A strange calm settled over me instantly. I had expected this moment, prepared for it. Rebecca Stein stepped forward smoothly beside Olivia. "Actually," she said evenly, "Mrs. Gibson documented evidence preservation before confrontation and voluntarily disclosed discrepancies through counsel." Daniel stared at her in horror. Rebecca continued calmly. "We also possess timestamp inconsistencies proving unauthorized use of her credentials during periods when Mrs. Gibson was physically absent from Illinois." Beautiful, precise, professional. I watched the realization spread slowly across Daniel's face. He couldn't throw me under the bus anymore, because I had already protected myself legally. For the first time all night, he looked truly trapped. Not embarrassed, not angry. Trapped. Vanessa grabbed his arm suddenly. "Say something?" she whispered harshly. Interesting. Not comfort, not concern. Survival. Even now, she was thinking about herself first. Ethan Brooks looked physically ill while flipping through documents. "These expense reports," he muttered. "Jesus Christ." Another board member interrupted sharply. "Are these hotel charges real?" Nobody answered immediately, because Daniel couldn't, not truthfully. One donor near the front table suddenly stood up, furious. "My family donated nearly $2 million to this foundation." More shouting erupted immediately afterward. People demanded answers. Several sponsors began leaving outright. One elderly woman shook her head at Vanessa with open disgust while walking toward the exit. And through all of it, I stood strangely still. For weeks, I imagined this moment would feel explosive emotionally. But instead, it felt almost detached, like watching a building collapse after hearing structural cracks for years. The destruction was horrifying, but inevitable. Daniel finally turned toward me fully. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered. That question stunned me, because even now, after everything, he still viewed himself as the victim. I stared at him carefully. "You used my name to protect yourself. That's not what happened. You slept with my best friend." His face twisted painfully. "Lauren, you lied to me for years." People nearby fell silent listening now, and suddenly, for the first time all night, Daniel's polished executive mask completely disappeared. "I made mistakes," he said quietly. Mistakes. Such a small word for devastation. Vanessa stepped forward defensively. "We didn't mean for this to happen." I looked at her in disbelief. "You didn't mean for years of deception to happen." Tears filled her eyes suddenly. Real tears this time. But not guilt. Fear. Pure fear. Because she finally understood her social standing, career, and reputation were evaporating simultaneously. One of the board members approached Rebecca urgently. "We need immediate legal review tonight." Rebecca nodded. "That would be wise." Another donor shouted from across the room. "You people used charity money for affairs?" Humiliation spread visibly across Daniel's face now. Not because he betrayed me, because witnesses existed. That realization changed something inside me permanently. Men like Daniel fear exposure more than conscience. Olivia moved beside me quietly. You okay? I looked at my daughter standing there protecting me publicly, while her father's career disintegrated 10 feet away. No, I admitted softly, and it was true. Despite everything, grief still lived inside me. Because the man collapsing in front of the city tonight was once the man who held my hand during childbirth. The man who built our first kitchen table. The man who cried when Olivia left for college. Love doesn't disappear instantly simply because truth arrives. That's what makes betrayal so painful. You mourn someone while they're still standing in front of you. Suddenly, Daniel grabbed my wrist again, this time harder. Lauren, he whispered desperately, please, we can fix this. I looked down at his hand slowly, and for the first time in 35 years, I saw him clearly. Not powerful, not brilliant, not charismatic, just selfish. A man who believed forgiveness was owed to him because he finally got caught. I pulled my hand away calmly. No, I said quietly. You can't. Security personnel had quietly entered the ballroom by then. Not because of violence, because institutions protect themselves fast when scandal threatens money. Ethan Brooks approached Daniel heavily. The board is placing you on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. The words landed like gunshots. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Vanessa inhaled sharply beside him, and Ms. Carter Ethan continued turning toward her. Your access to foundation accounts is suspended effective immediately. Vanessa actually stumbled backward. No, she whispered. But yes, it was happening. Right there beneath crystal chandeliers and melting ice sculptures and abandoned champagne glasses, their entire carefully constructed world was collapsing in public. Marcus Hale approached Ethan holding a recorder. Can the foundation confirm allegations of financial misconduct? Ethan looked exhausted already. We're reviewing documentation currently. Translation. The nightmare had officially become public record. Vanessa suddenly looked toward me with naked hatred. Not shame. Hatred. You ruined everything, she whispered. I stared at her for a long moment, then quietly replied, No, you did. And somehow that was the truest thing I said all night. Because none of this started at the gala. It started the moment they decided my loyalty made me safe to betray. Daniel looked older suddenly. Much older. The kind of aging that happens in minutes instead of years. One final time he tried appealing emotionally. Lauren, after everything we built together. His voice cracked, and for a dangerous second, old grief almost softened me. Then I remembered the emails, the lies, the forged signatures. Vanessa wearing my necklace while sleeping with my husband. And worst of all, their certainty that I would remain silent forever. I looked directly into Daniel's eyes and spoke the sentence that finally ended our marriage completely. You stopped building with me a long time ago. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. Then I turned away from him for the last time, while reporters flooded the ballroom entrance, and the empire Daniel Gibson spent decades constructing began collapsing behind me. The morning after the gala, I woke up alone in the guest bedroom. For several seconds, I forgot everything. Then my phone started vibrating. Again, and again, and again. Reality returned all at once. News alerts, missed calls, text messages, voicemails. By sunrise, Chicago already knew. I lay there staring at the ceiling while snowlight filtered weakly through the curtains, and my phone continued buzzing endlessly on the nightstand beside me. Hospital executive under investigation after gala scandal. Charity foundation facing financial review. Prominent Chicago couple at center of public allegations. The headlines spread faster than I imagined possible. Not just local news, either. Social media devoured the story overnight. People love watching powerful lives collapse, especially when betrayal is involved. I finally sat up slowly around 8. The house felt unnaturally quiet, empty, like something had already died there. Downstairs, I found Daniel sitting alone at the kitchen table, still wearing yesterday's wrinkled dress shirt. His eyes looked bloodshot, gray somehow, older. He looked up when I entered. For one long moment, neither of us spoke. Then quietly he said, "I didn't sleep. Neither did I." Coffee sat untouched beside him. His phone buzzed constantly against the table. Board members, attorneys, reporters, probably Vanessa too. Good, let chaos keep him company now. I opened the refrigerator mechanically, suddenly aware that despite everything, human bodies still needed food. Water, routine. Trauma never pauses ordinary biology. "You destroyed us," Daniel said softly behind me. I closed the refrigerator door slowly. Then I turned around and looked at him carefully. "No," I replied. "I exposed you." That landed hard, because somewhere deep down, Daniel knew it was true. He rubbed both hands over his face. The board suspended me. I said nothing. Federal auditors contacted the foundation this morning. Still nothing, and Marcus Hale published everything online. He sounded genuinely shocked, as though consequences were somehow unfair. That part fascinated me most. Men like Daniel believe consequences are tragedies instead of outcomes. Finally, he looked directly at me. "Did you ever love me at all?" The question stunned me so deeply I almost laughed. After everything he'd done, he still needed emotional reassurance. "Yes," I whispered honestly. "I loved you more than anyone." Daniel's eyes filled unexpectedly. Then why couldn't we handle this privately? There it was again. Privacy, protection, containment. As though my role in life was still preserving his comfort. I walked toward the kitchen island slowly. "Because you stopped treating me like a person privately a long time ago?" Silence. Heavy. Painful. Daniel stared down at the table. And for the first time since the gala, I saw something that resembled actual shame flicker across his face. Not fear of losing his job. Not fear of investigation. Personal shame. Too late. Far too late. "I never meant to hurt you like this," he whispered. That sentence broke something open inside me. Because suddenly, I understood the truth completely. He really believed intention mattered more than destruction. People like Daniel think betrayal only counts if they planned cruelty from the beginning. But affairs built over years are choices repeated daily. Every hotel room, every lie, every time Vanessa sat in my kitchen pretending to love me. Those were choices. "I need you to leave," I said quietly. Daniel looked stunned. "This is my house too." "No," I replied softly. "It was our house. You ended that." For several seconds he just stared at me. Then something cold entered his expression again. Ah, there he was, the real Daniel. "If this investigation goes badly," he said carefully, "your name could still be dragged through it." Threat. Subtle, but clear. I looked directly into his eyes. Try it. And for the first time in our entire marriage, Daniel looked afraid of me. An hour later, Olivia arrived carrying groceries and legal documents. The second she saw Daniel still sitting in the kitchen, her entire body tensed. "You need to go," she told him flatly. "Olivia? No." The sharpness in her voice cut through the room instantly. "You don't get to manipulate Mom anymore." Daniel flinched visibly. Because daughters seeing their fathers clearly is a special kind of punishment. He gathered a few things quietly before leaving. No dramatic argument, no screaming, just silence. At the doorway, he paused and looked back at me. I did love you, Lauren. God help me. Part of me still believed that. That was the cruelest part of long marriages. People can love you and still destroy you anyway. After he left the house, felt unbearably still. Olivia hugged me tightly while I finally let myself shake again. Not from fear this time, from exhaustion. Weeks of adrenaline were leaving my body all at once. The next several days blurred together strangely. Reporters camped outside the neighborhood. Daniel officially resigned from Lakeshore Medical Center pending investigation. Vanessa was removed from foundation leadership entirely. Donors demanded audits. Board members released carefully worded public statements distancing themselves from both of them. And through all of it, my phone kept ringing. Old friends, distant relatives, women I barely knew. Some supportive, some curious, some hungry for gossip disguised as concern. That part hurt more than I expected. Public humiliation spreads beyond the guilty. Everywhere I went, people stared. At grocery stores, at pharmacies, at church. Not cruelly, almost worse, pityingly. Older women become objects of pity after betrayal. People look at us like abandoned houses. One afternoon, I finally listened to a voicemail from Vanessa. Her voice sounded ragged. "You ruined my life," she whispered through tears. "Do you have any idea what people are saying about me?" I almost deleted it immediately. But then she continued. "Daniel told me you'd never do something like this." That sentence stayed with me for days. Not because it hurt, because it revealed the truth. They both built their entire affair around the assumption that my dignity guaranteed my silence. Women my age are expected to endure humiliation quietly. Smile politely. Preserve appearances. Protect everyone else from discomfort. And when we refuse, people act shocked. About a week after the gala, I sat alone in the living room watching snow fall outside while lawyers discussed asset division upstairs with Olivia. The house no longer felt like home. Every room held ghosts now. Daniel reading newspapers by the fireplace. Vanessa drinking wine in the kitchen. Christmas mornings. Birthday dinners. 35 years of memories suddenly poisoned. I thought revenge would feel victorious. Instead, it felt lonely. Necessary, but lonely. That evening, Olivia sat beside me quietly on the couch. "You regret it?" she asked softly. I thought about the gala, Daniel's face, Vanessa's fear, the public collapse. Then I thought about the forged signatures, the lies, the years they spent treating my loyalty like weakness. "No," I answered honestly. Olivia squeezed my hand gently. "Good." Outside, snow continued covering Chicago in soft, white silence. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't grieving the end of my marriage anymore. I was grieving the version of myself who spent decades believing love meant enduring disrespect quietly. That woman was gone now. And despite the pain, I think losing her may have saved my life. 1 year later, I stood beside Lake Michigan holding a cup of coffee while sunlight spread across the water in pale gold ribbons. Chicago looked softer from this side of grief. Quieter. Or maybe I had finally become quiet enough to notice beauty again. The little townhouse I rented sat only 3 blocks from the lakefront. Nothing extravagant. Just a warm brick home with tall windows, creaky hardwood floors, and a tiny reading nook overlooking the street. For the first time in decades, every object inside belonged only to me. No performance, no pretending, no walking on emotional glass, just peace. People imagine healing arrives dramatically after betrayal. It doesn't. Healing comes in tiny moments. The first full night you sleep without checking someone's location. The first meal that tastes good again. The first morning you wake up and realize you didn't think about them immediately. That's how survival really happens. Slowly. Olivia visited almost every weekend now. Sometimes with takeout. Sometimes with laundry she claimed was accidentally piling up. Mostly, I think she just wanted to make sure I was truly okay. And honestly, some days I still wasn't. Trauma doesn't disappear simply because justice happened. There were still nights I woke up angry. Still moments I heard certain songs and remembered road trips with Daniel before everything became contaminated. Still days when loneliness hit me so suddenly, it stole the air from my lungs. 35 years is a lifetime. You don't erase a lifetime neatly, but something else had changed too. I no longer hated myself. That was new. For months after the gala, women reached out to me privately. At first, through emails, then phone calls, then coffee meetings. Widows, divorced women, women financially trapped inside unhappy marriages. Women cheated on after 40 years together. Women whose husbands quietly transferred assets while calling them crazy. I listened to story after story and slowly realized something heartbreaking. So many women my age had spent decades shrinking themselves to keep other people comfortable. And society rewarded us for it. Be graceful. Be forgiving. Be quiet. Preserve dignity. Protect the family. Meanwhile, men were allowed complexity, excuses, mistakes, second chances. One afternoon, after meeting a 63-year-old woman whose husband secretly drained their retirement account before leaving her for a younger coworker, I came home furious. Not at her husband, at the system, at the way older women are trained to believe endurance is virtue even when it destroys us. That night, Olivia looked at me across the dinner table and said something simple. You know you've helped more people this year than Dad probably did in 20? That stayed with me. A few months later, I started volunteering part-time at a women's financial advocacy center downtown. Nothing glamorous, just practical workshops, budget literacy, retirement protection, asset awareness, legal documentation. I taught women how to read financial statements their husbands assumed they'd never question. And strangely enough, it gave me back pieces of myself I thought were gone forever. Not Lauren Gibson, the supportive executive wife. Lauren Mitchell, the auditor, the investigator. The woman who noticed things. The woman who mattered. As for Daniel, the investigation dragged on quietly for months. Eventually, several settlement agreements were reached privately with the foundation and donors. Public criminal charges never fully materialized, largely because the hospital board desperately wanted the scandal contained. Money protects powerful men in ways ordinary people never fully understand. But Daniel lost everything that mattered to him most. His position, his reputation, his influence. People stopped inviting him to charity events. Former colleagues avoided eye contact in restaurants. And perhaps worst of all, for a man like Daniel, people stopped admiring him. I saw him only twice after the divorce finalized. The first time was in court. The second happened unexpectedly near a grocery store downtown 6 months later. He looked older. Not physically older, spiritually older. Like regret had finally started eating through him slowly. We stood beside shopping carts in awkward silence while snow drifted outside, automatically opening doors. "How are you?" he asked quietly. Such a strange question after destroying a life together. "I'm okay." He nodded slowly. Then he said something I never expected. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." A year earlier, hearing those words would have shattered me emotionally. Instead, I simply felt tired. because love without respect eventually becomes grief. I know, I replied softly. And then I walked away. I never saw Vanessa again. After the gala, she disappeared almost completely from Chicago's charity circles. Rumors spread constantly. Florida, Arizona, California. No one seemed entirely sure, and honestly, I stopped caring. That surprised me most of all. For months, I thought revenge would define the rest of my life, but eventually, survival becomes more interesting than revenge. One evening, near the anniversary of the gala, I sat beside the lake, watching waves strike frozen rocks while winter wind cut across the shoreline. And for the first time, I allowed myself to ask an honest question. If I could go back, would I still expose them publicly? I thought about it for a long time. About humiliation, about consequences, about destroying the life I once protected. And finally, I realized the answer wasn't really about punishment at all. It was about self-respect. The gala wasn't the night I ruined Daniel and Vanessa. It was the night I stopped abandoning myself to protect people who never protected me. That distinction matters, because revenge alone leaves people empty. But reclaiming your voice, that changes everything. As the sun disappeared slowly behind Chicago's skyline, I pulled my coat tighter and smiled faintly into the cold wind. Not because my life became perfect afterward. It didn't. Some scars never fully disappear, but for the first time in decades, my life belonged to me again. And at nearly 60 years old, that felt like freedom. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted deeply, I want you to remember this. Loving someone should never require you to disappear completely. And starting over is not weakness, even at 50, 60, or beyond. If this story touched you, please subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I would truly love to know where you're watching from and what part of Lauren's journey stayed with you the most. Sometimes strangers understand our pain better than the people closest to us ever did.